Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. They say people need hobbies, and I didn't know where to start, so I just drew names out of a hat and I wound up with spelunking. Thought it'd be fun, until I slipped, and now I've been stuck down here for like 3 days or so, but I think I finally found a way out. Oh god! Whew. I made it! Sweet, sweet daylight. Sweet, sweet daylight. Wait, what? Huh? I was down there for like 60 hours. It shouldn't be light outside. What the hell? Oh, right, I forgot. Time freezes when you go underground. Anyone who's played Pikmin 2 should know that.
Pikmin 2, From Survival to Capitalism, a sequel to one of the earliest GameCube titles, which came out only a few years afterwards, something that Pikmin fans should not have gotten used to. The first Pikmin game wasn't a system seller, but it did pretty well for a brand new IP, so it would only make sense to make another one, and only a year after the first game's release, Shigeru Miyamoto announced that a sequel was in development. The game was co-directed by Shigefumi Hino, the creator of Yoshi, who primarily focused on the graphical design, as well as Masamichi Abe, who primarily focused on the gameplay design, with Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka serving as producers. Development took about 2.5 years, and its release was planned to be in the fall of 2003, but it got pushed back a bit. They wanted players to be able to explore the game at a more leisurely pace, so the first game's 30-day time limit was removed, and the game was made a lot longer as a result, for better or for worse. A 2-player mode was experimented with, but they felt that it would be too limiting on the overall game design, so instead it was given its own side mode. Pikmin 2 was released to the GameCube on April 29, 2004 in Japan, and other countries would get it thrown at them later in the year. At the time, it was received super well, about on par with the first game, if not better, but that reputation has shifted over the years. People seem really split on whether or not this is the best game in the series or the worst, and a lot of that comes down to one single aspect, but we'll get there when we get there. It didn't sell quite as many copies as the first game, but it still managed to break over 1 million units, so it was a financial success. Like the first game, it was later ported to the Wii as part of the new Play Control line, where they would take GameCube games and then remaster them for the Wii with motion controls, which is the version I'll be playing today, but it weirdly took a long time for that version to come out in North America. Every other territory got it in 2009, but us Patriots and Canadians didn't get it until 2012, and I have no idea why. And both of the first two games were remastered for the Switch as part of a collection in 2023 as a build-up for the hotly anticipated Pikmin 4.
I enjoyed my time with the first Pikmin game, but I didn't quite love it as much as most people do. Since then, I've become a bit more versed in the series, and now this is the only one I have not played, and it's easily the most divisive entry, so I'm not entirely sure how I'm gonna feel about it, but I'm still willing to give it a shot. Is it a step forward or a step backward? Let's see.
Our story opens up right where the first one left off, with Olimar finally returning to his home planet of Hecate. Upon arrival, though, he learns that the company he works for has gone under. Apparently, another delivery pilot named Louie was carrying a supply of golden pick carrots, but he was attacked by a space rabbit and lost all of them. So the company president was forced to take out a massive loan, putting him in severe debt, and now he's selling all the company assets to pay it off, including Olimar's ship, the Dolphin. Wow, you spent all that time rebuilding it, and he just pawns it off like it's nothing. Sadly, he's still 10,100 Pokos, the planet's currency, in debt. However, a bottle cap Olimar brought back as a souvenir for his son turns out to be worth 100 Pokos. The president quickly realizes that the planet Olimar was stuck on must be full of treasure like this, so he sends both Olimar and Louie back to the planet to go find some. Upon arriving, they crash land because I'm starting to think Olimar is just bad at this and end up separated, but they quickly reunite with the help of some nearby red Pikmin. So now it's up to Olimar and Louie to work together alongside the Pikmin to collect as much treasure as possible to pay off the company's 10,000 Poko debt. The story's about as basic as last time, but it definitely takes a much more comedic approach. The first game had a very simple setup, but it worked well enough. You're stuck on a planet, fix your ship before you die. Here your goal is to make as much money as possible by collecting treasure, which is actually just a bunch of random objects. It's clearly more lighthearted than it was last time, and I think it works just as well, only with a much different tone. The presentation is roughly on par with last time. Granted, I'm playing the Wii version instead of the GameCube, so the resolution is a bit better, but comparing the two, it's pretty much the same thing. Same goes for the music. It's pleasant to listen to, but a little atmospheric to really be memorable. Now, the gameplay is a lot more of the same. You use your Pikmin to explore different areas of the planet and collect whatever objects you need while killing enemies to protect yourself and rebuild your stock of plant soldiers. The main difference is that instead of collecting ship parts, you're collecting treasure, which, as I stated, is just a bunch of random junk. In the last game, the planet you were on was heavily implied to be a post-apocalyptic Earth, and here that's even more leaned into by all the stuff you find. They range from inanimate objects to electronic devices to different types of food, and interestingly, some of them are real-world brands, making this whole game essentially filled with product placement. I mean, sure, you got some cute Nintendo references like a Game & Watch or an NES D-pad, but then you find stuff like Duracell batteries, a jar of Skippy peanut butter, or bottle caps for different drinks like Sprite and Yoo-Hoo. And this surprisingly doesn't feel like advertising. Olimar and Louie are joined by this AI that's connected to their rocket that gives each treasure a new name, so it feels like they're trying to identify what these objects are, which is honestly pretty charming. Although unfortunately this was taken out of the Switch release, making that the inferior version.
If there's one thing I can easily give Pikmin 2 credit for, it's that the stuff you're collecting is way more interesting than last time. The ship parts were alright and all, but most of them felt like random, weird machines. Here, this stuff you can actually recognize, which makes it a bit more fun to see what's gonna come next, which is kind of wrong given how most of it is just a bunch of junk.
Each object you collect has a different value to it, which goes towards paying off your debt. Your main goal is to collect enough objects objects for a total value of 10,000 Poco, so there's a lot more stuff to go for than there was in the last game, but if you're worrying about not getting it done in time, don't. The first game only gave you 30 days to get everything, but here you have as much time as you want, as previously stated. So while the time limit of stuff you can do each day is still here, the day limit has been completely removed. There are still consequences to taking too long, like respawning enemies, bridges coming undone, and even new enemies that spawn after a set number of days, but you don't have to worry about getting the bad ending and having to start all over. Now, if you're someone who liked the 30-day time limit, that might be disappointing, but if you're someone who hated it, then this is probably the best news you've heard all week, which isn't saying that much. I mean, have you seen the world lately? Jesus. Personally, I was pretty neutral in the day limit, so I'm totally fine with it being gone, especially since if there was a limit, it would be nearly impossible to get everything in here. But there are a few things in here that are inferior to before. One, the locations of each treasure aren't marked on the map, so they're harder to find, and two, their locations reset when the day changes, so even if you came close to getting it back to your ship, you have to go back to where it originally was. Like before, the planet is split into different areas. There's only 4 this time instead of 5, but one of them was just the final boss arena, so it's basically the same thing. There's the Valley of Repose, the Awakening Wood, that sounds like something dirty, the Perplexing Pool, and the Wistful Wild. And what I like about these areas is that each one looks like a different season. Valley of Repose is winter, Awakening Wood is spring, Perplexing Pool is summer, and Wistful Wild is fall. Admittedly, 2 of these are just reused layouts from the first game. The Awakening Wood is the Forest of Hope and the Perplexing Pool is the Distant Spring, but thankfully they look different enough to feel different from previously. Especially since you're not really going to be here for long, but more on that in a bit. One of the biggest changes in this game is that you have 2 captains instead of 1. You control both Olimar and Louie, and you can either pair them up or separate them to make 2 groups of Pikmin that you can switch between with the push of a button. This is easily one of the best changes to this game. Having 2 captains you can switch between lets you accomplish way more tasks in a single day. You still have to control each of them manually, but just being able to hop between 2 places at once let you explore much more areas of the map and manage Pikmin of certain types way easier. It also makes rounding up Pikmin at the end of the day much easier since you can cover more ground, and having 2 groups you can form means it's less likely you'll leave one behind. Speaking of which, you have access to the same 3 types of Pikmin you had in the first game. 2 of them work the same, with blues breathing underwater and reds being immune to fire, as well as the strongest of the 3. I honestly didn't know that when I played the first game, but yellows have been tweaked so that they can still be thrown higher, but bomb rocks have been completely removed, which I am all for because they were insanely annoying. Instead, they're now immune to electricity, which I'm kinda surprised wasn't in the last game. The only downside is, unlike fire or water, electricity will instantly kill any Pikmin of a different color, so you need to be extremely careful around this stuff, or else you can lose a lot of Pikmin really quickly. Thankfully, you won't be encountering electricity as much as the other hazards in this game, since for the majority of the playthrough, they only lie in one type of area, and that is the biggest addition to this game: the caves. Scattered across each of the areas are holes that lead to caves. Here, the game goes from being about exploration to more of a dungeon crawler. Each cave is divided into different sub-levels that are filled to the brim with treasure, but also crawling with enemies and hazards. What mainly sets the caves apart from the overworld is that these are less about time management and more about resource management. The time limit pauses every time you enter a cave, however, you only have access to whatever Pikmin you bring inside. If there are any in the overworld when you enter, they immediately die, so yeah, don't forget them. You can't grow new ones, since collecting enemies only gives you some extra pocket change, but you still want to collect their carcasses, since some of them can come back to life if you wait too long, or they just get in the way. Some do have these flowers that sprout more, but I didn't actually realize that until I was halfway through the game. Okay, that's on me. On the final floor of each cave, you face a boss, and killing it gives you a treasure that acts as some kind of upgrade. This can do things like give you a meter that detects treasure, which is essential, lets you punch enemies if you don't have any Pikmin, or give you the ability to pull Pikmin out of the ground with your whistle instead of plucking every single one. Yeah, this is easily my favorite. Remember how I said this is the most divisive game in the series? Yeah, that is almost entirely because of the caves. These are what really make or break the game for most people, since there are a lot of these, and you'll frankly be spending way more time in here than in the overworld. And personally, I think I might be a cave hater. Okay, let me make it clear, I don't hate the idea of the caves. They can be an interesting way to change up the main gameplay, and going from getting everything done as quickly as possible to meticulously managing the amount of Pikmin you have is a solid concept. My main problem lies with the execution. Some of these places can be really frustrating. There are a lot more enemies to deal with in the caves, and because you're in a much more enclosed space, you really need to be on your A game. And a lot of the enemies, like these flying bugs that grab you, or these spiders that are nearly impossible to hit and launch elemental attacks, can be absurdly annoying. Plus, you need to be careful, since some of the hazards can literally come falling out of nowhere, which I would be more forgiving of if the caves were shorter, but I wasn't kidding when I said you'll be spending more time underground than in the overworld. Each cave is separated into roughly 5 to 10 floors, and each floor will take about 3 to 5 minutes to complete if you're lucky. So that means each cave will take anywhere from 15 minutes to over an hour to complete, and that is not an exaggeration. Frankly, I think you could enroll in medical school, get your degree, and then pay off all of your student loans in the amount of time it takes to complete some of these. It is a good thing there's no time limit in here, because it would be literally impossible to explore these places in only 13 minutes. From a story perspective, I don't know why time freezes, but gameplay perspective, I am eternally grateful. Thankfully, the game automatically saves every time you reach a new floor, and if things go really south, you can just reset the game to get another try, but that only makes things take even longer. And that's not even getting into the fact that the layout of each floor is randomized every single time, including resets. So sometimes whether or not you make it through in a timely or easy manner comes down to luck. The actual design is the same, but the location of each enemy, treasure, and even the exit are different every single time. So sometimes it's pretty easy to get through, other times really strong enemies are placed in the most inopportune places possible. Sadly, these places are also pretty repetitive. A lot of them look exactly the same, and many times the only challenge is the game just throwing a bunch of enemies at you, which gets old fast.
I don't think the caves are a terrible idea, and there are some I enjoy, but the majority are either annoyingly long, really frustrating, or both. So while the concept is solid, the execution is not the best.
But thankfully, there are some good things to come from the caves. Mainly, we have 3 new types of Pikmin added. Well, okay, it's more like 2.5. Inside the caves, you can find these flowers that will change the color of whatever Pikmin you throw into them. We saw some of these in the first game, but that was just a way of solving puzzles or preventing backtracking. Here, these are the only way to acquire Pikmin of these colors. There's the purple Pikmin, who are heavy, and the white Pikmin, who are light. Purples are by far the strongest, even more so than red, since they can demolish almost any enemy in seconds. They cause shockwaves when they hit the ground, which stun enemies, and they have the strength of 10 Pikmin when carrying things. The only downside is they move really slow. Whites, on the other hand, are the fastest when moving and carrying objects. They can dig up treasure that's hidden underground, they're immune to poison, and can even poison enemies if they get eaten. I think these two are a great addition to the game, since both are extremely useful. One's better for combat, while the other is better for transportation. The downside is, like I said, you can only get them from flowers in caves. They don't have their own onions, so you can't grow them in the overworld. And don't think you can just walk up to a flower and chuck 100 Pikmin in there to get an unstoppable army of grape soldiers. Each flower can only make 5 Pikmin of a certain color. Honestly, I think this is a good way to balance things out. Purples are frankly busted when it comes to killing enemies, but since you don't have access to that many, it makes losing one sting even more, so you don't want to rely on them for everything, since using them can be more effective, but it's also a lot more risky. Whites, on the other hand, can effectively be sacrificed to aid you in combat, but since their numbers are limited, you don't always want to do that on purpose. The other ones you can get are the Bulbmen. Tiny bulb orbs, yes, I actually learned the name of them, with little leaves sticking out of them. You find these guys just roaming around the caves with their mother, and if you kill the mama, the others will start following you for some reason. I guess they respect the alpha. They're the weakest in terms of power, but they're immune to all 4 hazard types, which can make them really useful if you're short on Pikmin of a specific color. Although you can't bring them outside like with purples and whites. They stay behind in whatever cave you found them in, so their use is only temporary.
I think the new Pikmin added are great. They're extremely useful, and their limited availability keeps them from being completely overpowered. I will say this does cause one big issue, but we'll save that for later. For now, let's talk about how much better using the Pikmin is. Mildly.
My biggest issue with the first game was that the AI for the Pikmin was awful, and here it's much better, though still not great. They don't trip all the time, you can cross bridges without worrying about them just falling in, they don't pluck grass every single chance they get, and if you command them to go somewhere and they don't do it, they don't just stand there doing nothing until you call them. But they can still get left behind if you move too fast or don't wait long enough when pulling them out of the onions. Sometimes you disband them, but 1 or 2 keep following you anyway. If you disband them near water, they can fall in, and they don't always take the best path when carrying things. But we also have some new tricks up our sleeve. They can eat nectar to grow these flowers on their heads, making them faster and stronger, which is totally a brand new addition in this game, and not something I completely forgot to mention the first time. And more importantly, you can collect these berries, which can be made into sprays if you bring 10 of them into the rocket. Red berries make spicy spray, which temporarily increases the speed and strength of any Pikmin you're currently controlling, and purple berries make bitter spray, which turns enemies to stone for a few seconds, letting you destroy them with ease. Or at least in theory, that's how it's supposed to work, because I have many times where I turned an enemy to stone and barely did any damage. I don't know, maybe I'm just hitting the wrong spot or something. These are extremely helpful, but it takes a while to gather them, so you want to use them sparingly. And the best change is that you can select whatever type of Pikmin you want to throw by holding down the A button and then pushing the B button to cycle through them, as opposed to always having to disband them, round up a certain color, and then hope you don't get anyone else by mistake. You still have to do that sometimes, and the different types can get mixed up even when cycling, but overall it's an improvement. At the end of each day, you get an email from either the company president or one of Olimar's family members checking in on you. This is the replacement for those captain's logs, and honestly I like these a lot better. It's nice being able to actually see Olimar's family, so we can actually put faces to the people we're supposed to care about, and some of these are just really funny, especially the president becoming more and more desperate as time goes on. And there's even some surprise characters like Louie's grandma, the president's wife, or hot MILFs in your area. I should also mention that since I'm playing the Wii version, the controls are really different. A and B work the same, C disbands while Z resets the camera, and you use the minus button to switch captains. But the main difference is you can now move and aim independently with the Wii Remote's pointer, and it is so much better. Being able to adjust your shot without moving your character is an absolute godsend. While it can be a little hard to hold your hand still while mashing the A button, it's overall an improvement. Though I do think commanding Pikmin was better in the GameCube version, that used the C stick, while this you push down on the D-pad and then aim in the corresponding direction with the pointer. It works, but for whatever reason I kept accidentally hitting one of the sides on the D-pad, which zoomed the camera in and out when I didn't want to. So I guess that's a trade-off to each version. One has better aiming, the other has better commanding. Not sure how the Switch version pairs up, but whatever. As for the side modes, we have Challenge Mode returning, and this time you have to complete a cave as fast as possible while collecting additional treasure, and honestly I think this works better than the normal cave since it's more of a bite-sized little challenge, hey, wait a minute, rather than being part of a big adventure that takes way longer than it should. And there's a new 2-player mode where 2 players compete to grab marbles. You either need to collect 4 of these yellow marbles or harvest your opponent's personal marble to win, and it can get pretty hectic, which is honestly really fun. And I love how the faces of Olimar and Louie change to be more smug or more pissed depending on who's won more games. But easily the best thing about this game is the new Piclopedia. Here you find information on all of the enemies in the game, and both Olimar and Louie will give notes on them. Olimar Olimar talks about their behavior while Louie talks about how he would cook and eat them. Grass.
But now I think it's time we talk about the biggest issue with this game. It goes on for way too long.
I know this isn't just because of the caves, though that is a large reason for it. The game essentially has two halves to it, the first of which ends when you pay off your debt. After collecting 10,000 Pokos, Olimar hops in the ship and flies back to Hakatate, only to realize he left Louie behind. We then get this really funny credit sequence of Louie trying to survive on his own. Upon arriving, Olimar tells the president that there's still a bunch of treasure back on the other planet, so he volunteers to come with him to get it all. Oh, yeah, get Louie back too, I guess. So yeah, paying off your debt is only the first half of the game. The second half is Olimar and the president gathering up all the remaining treasure, and searching for Louie too, I guess. And it isn't until this happens where you get the ability to see how much treasure is in each area and cave, thank God, but you also unlock the last area of the game. Yeah, the Wistful Wild isn't actually unlocked until you pay off your debt, which already took me like 10 hours to do, so I wasn't exactly looking for more content. Yeah, the game doesn't actually end until you basically complete it 100% by collecting every treasure, and if you miss one in a cave, either because you didn't see it, or you didn't have the pigment of the correct color because the hazard wasn't shown to you, or because you ran out of a specific color, then you have to go through the entire cave all over again. And you can't just exit once you grab it, because then you'll lose everything you've collected. You have to find one of these geysers, which sometimes is only on the bottom floor. Now, thankfully, the longer ones do have a few extra geysers, and once you collect all the treasure on the floor, you can just make a beeline for the exit. You don't need to bring all your pigment along, but it's still pretty annoying. But that's not even the worst part. Oh, no. The worst part about getting all the treasure is this dumbbell in the Wistful Wild that requires 1,000 Pikmin, or more accurately, 100 purple Pikmin. I mean, okay, sure, if you give something the strength of 10 Pikmin, it might feel like a missed opportunity to not include something this heavy, but actually getting it is a massive pain. Like I said, purple Pikmin are not as easy to come by, and even if you go through all of the caves without losing a single one, you're not gonna have 100 by the end of it. So you have to go through one cave over and over again farming for them. I'd recommend the Subterranean Complex. I mean, this did only take me like 20 minutes, but I still shouldn't have to do that. And on top of that, because they move so slowly, it literally takes 5 minutes for them to actually bring it to the ship. Everyone saves the treasure for last, and for good reason. There's not much left to talk about, so I guess I'll just go over the individual caves. The Valley of Repose starts with the Emergence Cave, which is just a tutorial that only has 2 levels, one of which gives you your first purple Pikmin. Hell, it doesn't even have a boss fight. Off to the Awakening Wood, which has the Hole of Beasts, another pretty generic starting cave that ends with the first boss, the Empress Bulblax. A giant round bulborb that's really annoying because it rolls around and crushes your Pikmin instantly, and if it shakes them off and then rolls in that direction, it's impossible to save them. The White Flower Garden is also pretty simple, but it looks like a bunch of rusty pipes, and it's where you get white Pikmin for the first time. The boss is a burrowing Snagret, one of those bird heads from last time, and they actually pop up a few times throughout the game. Now we go to the Perplexing Pool and get yellow Pikmin and find the Citadel of Spiders. It's full of spiders, wow, who would have guessed? The boss is the Beady Longlegs, another returning boss who's really easy. Back to the Awakening Wood to get some blue Pikmin, and we can reach the Bulblax Kingdom, another generic dirt cave that has this really annoying room filled with big enemies you can't see because of how dark it is. This place ends with the Emperor Bulblax, the final boss from the first game, who you have to hit in the exact right spot to damage.
Well, someone sure got a big demotion, and with how annoying he was in the last game, not very thrilled about that.
We have all 5 Pikmin now, so it's back to the Valley of Repose, where we can go into the Frontier Cavern, an egregiously long cave filled with snow, and all the treasures are Christmas-themed, which is kinda neat. Shame that actually going through it takes forever. The boss is the Empress Bulblax again, but now it's constantly spitting out babies. Ew. Back to the Perplexing Pool, which has the Shower Room, a cave that looks like a bathroom floor. Riveting. The boss is the Ranging Blowstor, which is a souped-up version of normal enemy. Run in circles, hitting its tail so your Pikmin don't get eaten. Up next is the Submerged Castle, which is easily the worst cave in the game. For starters, it has every elemental hazard, but you can only enter with blues. But the real issue is if you are on any of these floors for more than 5 minutes, this abomination called the Water Wraith shows up and starts chasing you around. It steamrolls your Pikmin instantly, and no, you can't damage it. Plus, it moves at the same speed they do, so if this thing shows up, you're screwed. You gotta get out of there immediately, and if you don't collect every treasure before he shows up, you gotta do the whole thing all over again, and I spent half an hour resetting the 3rd and 4th stages to get everything in that time frame, and I physically could not do it. If you can get everything here in one go, you are more skilled and patient than me. At the bottom, you actually fight it, and it's really easy. Just throw some purples you get from a flower to stun him and then attack. The final cave in the Valley of Repose is the Subterranean Complex, another stupidly long cave that shifts from snow to rust. But in here, I finally got enough treasure to pay off the debt, leading to the false ending. Shame we're only halfway done. Going back with the president, I discovered that this place is home to the worst enemy in the game, the Gatling Groink, a giant bug that's weak in the back and shoots at you, which either stuns Pikmin or obliterates them. They take an absurd amount of damage to kill and respawn if you don't harvest them fast enough. The boss is the Man at Legs. That is a stupid name. A giant spider with a gun. Lovely. Only one cave left in the Awakening Wood, the Snagret Hole. This place looks like a lush garden. I thought I was supposed to be underground. Well, it actually shifts between themes and has you fight multiple burrowing Snagrets again. I thought I was done with these things. The boss is a pileated Snagret, which is the same thing but mobile. Last one in the perplexing pool, the Glutton's Kitchen, which is probably the best cave in the game. The whole thing looks like a child bedroom, which is neat, and it's filled with these bread bugs that grab stuff to pull them away, but if you throw enough Pikmin, you'll drag them back, which makes it easier to kill them. And the boss is a giant bread bug who you don't actually fight, you duke it out over obstacles. Some of the enemies can be tough, but overall this place is pretty fun. But now we can move on to the Wistful Wild, and these caves are miserable. They go on for an eternity. The Cavern of Chaos is an oversized mishmash of previous caves, and has one of the worst boss fights in the game, the segmented crabster, whatever. This thing rolls around, which can flatten your Pikmin, and you need to make it slam into a wall, but doing this causes insta-death rocks to fall. You then need to throw them onto its belly, but it is so unbelievably picky with how far you need to be that it's nearly impossible to do it in the 5 seconds you're allowed. Plus he has an annoying amount of health. I was on this for like 20 minutes. The Hole of Heroes is somehow even worse because it's the longest cave in the game and has you rematch multiple bosses all in a row. It is exhausting and miserable. And one of them is the Empress Bullbacks, which like I said earlier is completely luck-based. And you fight summon rooms with water everywhere so your Pikmin can drown. This game is just mean. The end is a fight with the Raging Longlegs, and wow, this is easy. It's literally just a bigger beady Longlegs, but since it's a bigger target, it's much easier to kill.
What the hell? Why does one of the hardest caves in the game have one of the easiest bosses? On second thought, I'm actually very okay with this.
This leads into our final cave, the Dream Den. Now, most of this place honestly isn't that bad since a lot of the floors only have one treasure on them, so you don't need to be in them for that long. Why couldn't the rest of the caves been like this? But 2 in particular are absolute hell. Sub-level 4 has these boulder guys on narrow platforms that can launch your Pikmin into a pit instantly, and sub-level 10 is filled with water, so you need at least 15 blue Pikmin to grab the treasure, but that's not super easy to do because there's a Gatling Grunk in here! So if it kills too many of your blues, you need to reset, and this place has a bunch of other enemies in it too. I was seriously in this one room for almost an hour, and this entire cave took me almost 3. Jesus Christ, why does this game just not end? If you can actually reach the bottom, you find Louie, who's being held captive by the final boss, the Titan Dweevil, a giant mechanized spider that can spew all 4 elemental hazards at you: fire, water, poison, and electricity, which is still insta-death, by the way. You need to attack all 4 of its weapons, which thankfully don't come back, and these things have an absurdly large amount of health. Plus, there's no indicator, so you have no idea how much damage you've done to them, or how far you need to stand to hit them in the first place. The order I did them in was the electric, which is on the front, poison, which is on the back, water, which is on the left, fire, which is on the right. I was honestly getting hand cramps from all this, and that's not even the end. Once you take all of them out, you have to attack its body. Now, it can't actually hurt you, but you still have to do a lot of damage to it because we can't let the game end just yet. My successful attempt alone took me over 20 minutes just because of how much health this stupid thing has. Game, stop. Please. If you actually take him out, you get the 4 weapons as treasures, as well as Louie, who's only worth 10 Pokos. Frankly, I expected less. With all the treasure collected, Olimar and the President fly back to Hakatate as the Pikmin bid them farewell by glowing, and that's it, the game just ends. However, there is an unlockable epilogue where we discover that Louie lied about being attacked by a space rabbit, and in reality, he ate all of the golden carrots himself, meaning that Louie was the real villain of the game.
Both a step up and a step down for Pikmin 1. There are some nice quality of life improvements, like better Pikmin AI, having 2 captains, and the new types of Pikmin, which are both pretty fun to use. But man, it is really brought down by the caves. I'm sorry, but I just did not have fun playing those because of how insanely repetitive and annoying they are, which I'd be more forgiving of if they weren't so friggin' long. These don't just take up half of the game, they take up 3/4 of it, and by the end, I was just sick of playing Pikmin 2. It seriously took me around 20 hours to beat this game, which is roughly the same amount as
Ocarina of Time! Now, to be fair, yes, that was my third playthrough of that game, and this was my first playthrough of this one, but my point still stands. This game just completely overstays its welcome, and yes, you could maybe argue that paying off your debt is the real ending of the game, and then going for all the other treasures is post-game, but it very clearly wants you to get all of that stuff. That's like playing one of the Johto Pokemon games, and then completely ignoring Kanto. Like, that's not just post-game stuff, that's literally half the story. So I don't think Pikmin 2 is a bad game. I personally didn't like it very much. If it's your favorite game in the series, I can kinda understand why, but for me, I think it is just way too bloated for its own good, and I don't think I am ever gonna play through the entire thing again. If I'm going back to Pikmin 2, it's for the side modes. But there is one thing I still find really weird. What was Louie doing on the Titan Dweevil at the end of the game? I mean, it didn't look like he was ensnared or anything, he was just sitting there. So, was he really in any danger, or was he maybe working with the Titan Dweevil? Oh my god, Louie might be the most evil character in Nintendo history.